Hey everybody, it's David Berry again. Here we are again. Just as Terry and I promised, we were going to do this every Monday. And today we're coming from Charleston, South Carolina. And I don't think I've ever been there, but I know Terry, I know you have been. Good afternoon, Terry, and good afternoon, Corinne. How you guys?
Hi, David. Yeah, Charleston is a wonderful town. My gosh, the history, and it's beautiful, and the food is great, which is what I always look for. It's it's a great town. Great town.
Amazing. The first time I came to visit, I felt like just walking around Charleston made you want to be smarter and know more about history. There's so much to learn, so much to know.
Well,
that's great.
The thing that I can definitely say for sure is I've heard a lot of people talk about Charleston, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything bad about it. So it must be an amazing place, and it's on my bucket list to go to. So Corinne, if you don't mind sharing who you are and how many people, talk a little bit about helping some of these people leaving California, about your market, and let's get started with Charleston, South Carolina.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in California. In 2016, we decided to make the decision to leave California. My kids were young at the time. They were 3 and 6 years old, and we just didn't want to raise them in California anymore. So we didn't know where to go. My husband's a chiropractor. I had run his office. I'd always been a business owner. So we just sold everything and packed up into a motorhome and actually spent 10 months driving across the United States. Looked at 20 different states, 18,000 miles of traveling, and really just honed in on the Southeast, and then just fell in love with Charleston. So we ended up settling here after 10 months of traveling.
Did you just say you traveled 18,000 miles?
We did, yes, for 10 months.
And so you guys,
my husband, 2 kids, and 3 dogs.
Every week when we do our show, every week we talk about how important it is to go to these new communities. And Terry, we've never heard anybody go into 18,000 miles. Terry, why don't you talk a little bit about checking out these new communities? And that's amazing. I'm very proud of you for that.
I was proud of that too. It was a big feat, but definitely worth it.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I'm here in Orlando. I was born and raised in Florida, but left in 1984, so I was gone for 37 years. I just spent last weekend down in the Fort Myers area, and I got to tell you, I was like, wow, I could live here. This is great. So I can understand Corinne and her family driving all over the country because there's so many great places. And what's nice is that I'm sure Corinne experienced this also. You can get where there's freedom in state after state after state. It's not like California where like, well, if I live in the Central Valley, there'll be more people, or in the foothills, there'll be more people who think like I do. No, most people think the way we do, especially in the South. So there's just a lot of great places, and there's nothing wrong with exploring them and seeing where you might want to end up. So good for you, Corinne.
One of the most amazing things is that we didn't time it this way, but we traveled during the Trump presidential election. So, I mean, obviously that was a pretty heated, everybody was wearing their political affiliation on their sleeves, so we couldn't have timed it any better. Mm-hmm. And, there were places that when we were in California, we felt like we would be aligned with them, but then when we were actually out there and seeing all the political signs in people's driveways, and just, I mean, anywhere you went during that election, we had no TV, we had no radio, we just had, social media and talking to people. So it's kind of interesting because it was sort of a grassroots exploration where everybody was open and honest about how they felt. And I'll tell you that during that election coverage, we actually were in Virginia watching it, and all the predictions they were making prior to, that Florida was going to go blue and that Ohio was going to go blue. I was like, no, we were just there. I don't think so. And you're actually talking to the people compared to what, the pundits were saying. And, at that point in time, they were talking about, Georgia sort of been in this push-pull with Atlanta, and, everyone was saying that was firmly a red state. So we know that was a little bit more contentious during the election. And that was sort of the feeling we got through there as well. It's just the struggle between Atlanta and all the outlier areas. I definitely think it's moved more red lately since that election, but it was really interesting to see the difference between what they were saying on TV and what we actually experienced.
So Corinne, this wasn't on my agenda today, and it's not typically on our agenda, but you piqued my interest quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I want to get to Charleston, South Carolina. I really do. But before we do, since you have 18,000 miles, if you could just share, because one of the things that Terry and I try to do every week is we try to help educate people. We know that there's people in California that are just sitting and they're on the fence and they're like, I don't know where to go. We always tell them that you should check out 2 or 3 different cities, go stay the weekend, go really see what it's like. But if you could share a little bit more about this little trip of yours and how many different quadrants of the United States did you hit? And maybe just give somebody a tip as to why you didn't choose that area. And then let's end up back in Charleston, South Carolina.
So basically, when we lived in California, we lived in Lake Tahoe for the last 13 years. So we wanted to stay warm. So that definitely kind of led us on. We wanted to stay in the southern half of the United States. After 13 years of snow, we were pretty ready to sort of change that lifestyle up. I grew up in the Bay Area. So, the ocean and mountains and having the diversity of California proved to be very important to us. There are a lot of places that we liked in the middle of America, like Bentonville, Arkansas was a great town, but it felt very landlocked and claustrophobic to us. We loved a lot of places in Texas. But having that ability to get to the ocean and the mountains, we found was really important to us throughout our travel. So I always encourage people that when they're looking at places to live, I will tell you that we looked at, like I said, 20 states. There's places that we fell in love with the town, and places that we really didn't like, obviously, too. But you have to kind of look at what does your life look like there. I mean, there's so many things that you really don't necessarily realize are important to you until you sort of think about, obviously you want to look at jobs, you want to look at economy, you want to look at, what aligns to your core beliefs. But you also want to look at, okay, what do my nights and weekends look like? Like when I want to take my family to do something for the weekend, is that a road trip? Is it flying somewhere? Do I like to just do festivals and music things within my town? And we're a big, obviously, road trip family after our big RV adventure. So being somewhere where we could change up our environment within a 2 or 3 hour drive, we came to realize is really important for us. So that kind of narrowed it down to coming back to the coast, to the East Coast versus the West Coast. There was nowhere on the West Coast that aligned with what we wanted for our family. So South Carolina is pretty similar to California as far as if you look at like the longitude, it's sort of the same, has a lot of similarities. We have the mountains, we have the valleys, we have the coast, lakes, sort of it offers all the, obviously the Sierra Nevadas are a little bit more dynamic than the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Great Smoky Mountains, but it still gives you that feel of changing up your environment. We wanted to really be able to sort of do different things within a 2 or 3 hour drive. So that was a big reason for focusing on the Southeast, just the proximity. There's so many things that you can do within 3 hours. I'm in Florida in 3 hours, Terry. That's a good weekend trip down there. And I could be up in, Washington, D.C. if I wanted to within a day's drive. New York's only a 10-hour drive if you want to go up there. So there's so many things that you could do within a road trip. And we always had a feeling that with the way things, pre-COVID we moved, but there were things that we just sort of kind of became privy to of not really wanting to rely on planes to be our primary source of entertainment. And there's so much for us to do here. You can go to Williamsburg and see, Gettysburg, you can get history. There's just a lot to do here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And let's just, I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I don't know if Terry has one too, but what were your top 3 on the East Coast, coastal cities? Did you have any others that you really liked? And then I promise we're gonna dive really deep into Charleston, South Carolina.
So absolutely, Greenville was a really, really close second for us. We kind of went back and forth between, oceans or mountains, and we just spent 13 years in the mountains, so we opted for the coast beach life this time. We really liked the south of Atlanta and Georgia, and then Tennessee. We really liked areas outside of Gatlinburg, sort of in the mountains of Tennessee. Those are probably our top 3 choices. We kind of kept going back and forth between those. We spent 2 months exploring Florida, but I think for us, just having the diversity of wanting to be able to do mountains and have everything within a couple hours was important to us. My sister lives down in Florida, so we get to go down and visit all the time. I will say one thing though, like throughout my entire travels and everything we did, that was the prime driving reason why I became a real estate agent, is because when we would go and explore these places, I didn't really have agents picked out because we didn't know what towns we were going to like. But once we moved into a city and found out that we kind of wanted to explore a little bit further, we would find a real estate agent and spend the day with them. The biggest roadblock I kept running into is they kept wanting to show me houses. They would go and take me on tours of neighborhoods and houses, even though I explained to them up and down that I'm not buying a house today. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying the city on. And I really had a hard time conveying to them that here I am a person. I have no compelling reason to choose this area. So I'm looking for you to show me what would my life look like here. And I really had a hard time finding that across the United States. And that's why I was so grateful to, have Terry, to hook up with Terry, because that's been the greatest thing about coming here and becoming a real estate agent and helping so many people move from California, from New York, from New Jersey, from Ohio, is that when somebody has no idea of an area, I know what it's like to be a person that doesn't know an area. The first time people come to visit, and even if you're just coming out to visit just for the weekend, please call me, because I would be happy to just start your trip off and spend 2 hours with you, just giving you the lay of the land and getting your bearings and making recommendations for you and just getting to know you and really just showing you my town. I won't monopolize your entire weekend. I know you probably want to do things without me as well, but I always encourage people, we're not house shopping on that first trip, but I want to help you understand what life looks like here. What does your life look like? And that's the biggest reason why I became a real estate agent, was to help other people do the same. I'm grateful I've had the opportunity. The second thing I want to say is that all those places that we went to, there was no one perfect place. I mean, I could probably name 5 or 6 cities that if we had settled there, I know we would have been just as happy as we are here.
Well, Corinne, that's such great advice, and we really appreciate that. The biggest thing we want to get out of this is we're not trying to sell anybody a house in
No.
this weekly podcast. We're trying to give people education. And Terry, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do the interview for Charleston today. And if you have any other questions about this 18,000-mile road trip, and then we could lead into the Charleston, South Carolina, Terry, since you know the community really well. Go ahead, take it away, Terry.
I guess one more question about your road trip is, how did you pick the places you wanted to go? And how much time did you spend in each place just to say, the yes or no? Because I think that's important too. And because we know, I'm sure you look at Charleston a lot differently today than the first day that you pulled into the campground, if you will.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is we always had it in our head that we were going to make it all the way across the United States. Our first thing, we left California, we went to Utah. We kind of just made a vacation of it first at all the national parks, just to kind of get my kids, get acclimated and get the kids on board with it. It was stressful, getting packed up in California. So we just took a little vacation. Arizona would have been super easy for us. My parents were in Palm Springs. There are a lot of things that we really liked about Arizona, but we had it in our minds that we were going to keep going and explore all of our options. Then we wanted to go just stay south. So we basically just took the 40 and the 10 and bounced back and forth. We met so many families on the road that honestly, I never would have considered Bentonville, Arkansas. I hadn't even ever heard of it. And then met this family in Arizona, actually in the Grand Canyon, who were doing the same thing, going the opposite direction. And they were actually going to settle in Bentonville and open up a climbing gym. So many places and stories like that we came up with cities and places to visit because of people we met who were doing the same thing. Like I said, we knew we wanted to stay south. We knew we wanted to stay warm, and we knew we wanted to go to a conservative state. So that kind of set we kind of set the big cities. And then once we would get to a city, we'd probably kind of find something fun to do there. I was homeschooling my kids at the time, so we'd go to national parks or state parks. We did all the junior ranger programs in national parks, and the state parks in Florida are amazing for that kind of schooling. And then just in meeting people, they would tell us to go check out areas or neighborhoods. So it really kind of evolved. We honestly thought we were going to spend 3 months on the road, and we turned it into 10 months. There's too much to see.
That's such great advice again. I really, really appreciate you sharing. And for the people that are watching in the audience, we can't overemphasize how important it is to go check out cities. And you don't have to go house shopping. I'm sure some people want to go check out a couple of houses and see what the market looks like, but it's really not about the house. It's about where.
No, it's not. I mean, if you find a place that you like and a city that you like, you will find the house in the neighborhood that fits.
Sure.
So we would basically get to a city, spend a couple of days just doing something to get our kids, off the road, and kind of get a feeling for it. And then we probably would spend at least 3 days really a day with a realtor. We would look at job opportunities for my husband, go set up, interviews with chiropractors or doctors that were selling their practice.
Right.
We'd kind of pack that into sort of one day, and then would look at, the downtown area, go out and eat in the restaurants, and just sort of try the city on. And that usually took us about 3 days to see if it was something that we wanted to put on our short list.
All right, from a real estate standpoint, Terry, go ahead and take it away. What do you got to ask about real
Talk
estate?
about the Charleston market.
Yeah, let's talk about Charleston. And I know that Charleston is a lot more than just Charleston. Like I think you live west of Charleston. Is that right? So can you just kind of talk about the different areas people may want to consider when they come visit?
Absolutely. So Charleston, the greater Charleston area actually encompasses over 3,000 square miles. So when people talk about the city of Charleston and the historic area, they're generally talking about the peninsula of Charleston, which is actually a very small piece of the Charleston area. The Charleston metro area spans 3 different counties, and like I said, covers over 3,000 square miles. So your major cities within Charleston, you have the peninsula area of Charleston. Just north of it, you have Mount Pleasant, which is actually a very popular place for people in California. It's a very familiar transition for people from California. A lot of families I've helped move to that area. And then as you move inland a little bit, you have the area of North Charleston. Now I'll take back a little bit of history for you. So when you go back to colonial times, the way that Charleston is set up is how it's kind of the same as it was at that point in time. So down in the peninsula of Charleston, in the town of Charleston, it was actually called Charlestown, Chucktown, for King Charles. So that's where they had their townhouses. That's why you see the traditional historic homes of the row homes. That's where they spent about 8 months out of the year because there was no air conditioning at that time. And so the houses were really sort of stacked up as townhouses, is where the townhouse term comes from. And then just inland from that, so in the North Charleston area now, is where they had all of their plantations. And then in Somerville, which is actually where I live, is about 20 miles inland from Charleston. And that's where they had their summer homes because we have amazing oak trees and pine trees. And it's a little bit more shaded. It's insulated from the coast. We have a coastal breeze that kind of whips through. So our temperatures are generally a little bit cooler, a few degrees cooler in the summer.
So Corinne,
That's how Charleston's set up.
Corinne, I actually pulled up a map, and I think in the future we may actually start having some more visuals. But for today, I think you're giving an amazing description. And I don't think I've ever been to Charleston, but I'm looking at the map, and it's really like right on the coast. You're kind of describing all these different areas, and it seems like you can pretty much find whatever you're looking for in that community.
When people talk about housing prices, there's everything from, industrial areas and urban areas and charming historic areas. Cities that have, $10 million homes on the coastline and resort areas and private islands you could live on, like Kiowa or Seabrook Island. And then there's also just more, suburbs. Somerville's a little bit more of a suburb kind of an area. Mount Pleasant's more of a suburb kind of an area. But yeah, it's interesting when people talk about Charleston, they really kind of hone in on that peninsula of Charleston, which has amazing charm, history, some of the best restaurants in the United States, and then all the suburbs that surround it. So really you can, get a first-time home buyer at $250,000 all the way up to $5 million. It runs the whole gamut.
So I did a lot of promoting for this event because I know a lot of people are interested in Charleston, South Carolina. First, I'd like to talk about, I had way more positive comments. I think I only had one negative comment, but the positive comments was everybody said it was so beautiful. It's so amazing, so nice. The one negative comment that I saw was that somebody had mentioned in a comment that it was overpriced and that it wasn't a good value anymore, but maybe I'm not sure if that person knew what they were talking about, honestly.
Well, so when we moved here in 2017, just to give you an example, we bought our house for $350,000. So we have a 3,000 square foot house. It's in a country club community on the 9th fairway. 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath home that had been updated and remodeled. That same house now, if we listed it right now, we could probably list it for $525 or $530.
Yeah.
So with everything that sort of happened from 2020 until now, obviously there's been a huge influx of people into Charleston. I can't drive more than a mile without seeing 2 or 3 California license plates here. So there's definitely a lot of people that came from New York and California during, COVID, when the states were locked down and, politics became an issue. People became, to where they can work from home. So you didn't now have to live where you work. caused a massive influx. We have over 30 families a day moving to the greater Charleston area. And I think that that number is even very, very conservative.
Yeah.
So in that time, a very short period of time, we went from, having a really, really affordable market to obviously turning into a supply and demand situation. When I first started working here as a realtor in 2017, we would have 5,000 to 6,000 houses on the market. That's including, attached homes, detached homes, mobile homes, fractional ownership. In 2022, January of 2022, we were under 800 homes on the market.
Wow. Well,
you're talking about, so obviously prices rose, right? Between 2021, January 6th, when the election, happened and Biden was sworn in, to April 1st, we had an 18% increase in housing prices.
well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was curious too about inventory, days on market, and what's it like, and is it competitive? Are there multiple offers? So if somebody's really in the market to buy a home, can you share some facts about your community and days on market and what kind of seller incentives are going on and things like that that deal with real estate?
Yeah, so obviously there's a ton of new construction. One thing that's really prevalent in South Carolina that's not really prevalent in California anymore is there's a ton of open land. So, everything in South Carolina, they don't, pay paradise to put up a parking lot in very many places here. It just keeps sprawling because there is so much open land in South Carolina. So on the outskirts of every city, it's just growing. There's national home builders, there's local home builders, they're building houses and offering amazing incentives right now. We're back up to just under 3,000 houses on the market. So we have a much more balanced market now. 2 years ago, it was like a house came on the market, I'll meet you there in an hour, and it was under contract that night.
Wow.
It was crazy. So, we're much more balanced now. We have much more, houses on the market from 15 to 30 days if they're priced well and in a desirable area. We have a lot of unique properties here, historic properties. We have porch properties, waterfront properties, historical properties. Sometimes those can sit a little bit longer. But lots of builders, lots of construction going on, lots of growth in the area. One of the main things that attracted us to this area too is just the economy. In South Carolina, they produce things and sell things and export things. A couple of major things that have really driven the economy here is the manufacturing industry. So we have Volvo. The only plant that Volvo has in the United States is in Somerville, South Carolina. So they basically created a plant here, and any Volvo that's made in Volvo in the United States that is imported as built right here. We have Michelin tires. We have Boeing, obviously. Boeing is a huge, huge employer here. We build airplanes here right at the Charleston airport, and those get shipped all over the United States or all over the world. A lot of the operations from San Antonio and Washington have actually moved to South Carolina because of our very favorable employment laws for businesses. And right now, so Dorchester County is one of the counties in Somerville. They have 7 different, warehouse, multi-use, huge structures going in the next 5 years, just because to offset how many companies want to move here. They are deepening and widening the port in Charleston. So now we have the deepest and widest port in all of the Eastern Seaboard, which is a huge incentive for companies to come here. Walmart just built a huge distribution center here because we can take larger ships in most places. And with all the problems with, boats and everything on the West Coast, they really want to become an open avenue for trade happening on the East Coast.
Wow.
That's been a huge influx of the Port Authority, been a huge influx of employment.
Sounds like you guys have amazing opportunities. It sounds like it has so much to offer. The last question I have, and then we'll get into the fun topics about because I'm sure you have a long list of fun stuff to do. But if somebody was interested in finding an amazing realtor like you, what kind of geographical areas do you cover? Do you cover all of it, or do you just have a specific area that your market that you take care of?
Because I primarily started with working with people from out of state, I go everywhere. Because when my clients come from California or from New York or wherever they're coming from, they all have different needs and different wants. And you have a lot of realtors that have been here for a long time that primarily work within their neighborhood. or within a certain area, I honestly work everywhere because, like when people are coming in from out of state, I do feel like I'm the best ambassador for it. I'm here to service them, to learn as much about the area. Probably the first year that I was here, my husband would literally drive me around and I would, make notes and videotape neighborhoods because I really wanted to be the resource that helps people find the best fit for him. We have so many options here in South Carolina that in the Charleston area that I never want to be in a position where I'm talking somebody into moving into an area that I know. So I really, really pride myself on being, gathering as much knowledge of the different areas because my clients are moving to all the different areas.
That's fantastic. That's great. So, all right, Terry, let's talk
A lot of
about,
miles on my Volvo.
let's talk about the fun stuff, Terry. What is it so much that you love about Charleston, South Carolina? Let's talk about some fun and exciting things that are in that city.
Well, it is a beautiful place. Yeah, I love the history of Charleston, but because I've been out to the fort where Fort Sumter they take you out there on a little boat, and it's great to tour around Fort Sumter. I love the Civil War history. It's just fascinating to me. Of course, people may know that the start of the Civil War was in Charleston, South Carolina.
Required Fort Sumter.
That's right. That's right. But the thing that I especially love is the food. I will tell you that Sullivan's Island, the restaurants on Sullivan's Island, which is very near Charleston, spectacular. And I got to tell, I was just this weekend, I was just telling a friend of mine that I visited down in South Florida. I went to Folly Beach, to that restaurant right there on the pier at Folly Beach, and had fresh shrimp, fresh buffalo shrimp, breaded and fried with blue cheese crumbles. I've got to tell you, there is a massive difference between fresh shrimp and the shrimp that all of us have eaten our entire lives, which is frozen. And so that my mouth is watering as we speak because it was
right
so
now,
dang good.
It's shrimping season. You can actually go down to Shem Creek, and as the boats come in, you just bring your cooler down there, and you actually just buy shrimp off the boat and take them home.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's
So
amazing.
yeah. So if you can talk about, one thing I wanted to ask before I forget is tell us what life was like when you first got there and what it's like today. What, as your perceptions changed, how did you adjust to Charleston? And then I certainly want to ask you about hurricanes too, because I'm sure people are wondering about that.
Absolutely. Probably a number one question. I will say that when we came to look at Charleston, I thought that my perception of Charleston could not have been more wrong. I really kind of had this impression that people in Charleston, that you weren't from Charleston or from the South, that you weren't going to be able to make a life here or be accepted, or they wouldn't want somebody from California living in Charleston. I couldn't have been more wrong. Most people here are not from here. So I'll kind of tie this into a little bit of a hurricane history. So Charleston actually is pretty well insulated from hurricanes. If you look at sort of the eastern seaboard, Charleston and the southern part of South Carolina is actually tucked in. When you think about hurricanes coming up, they don't want to make landfall. Hurricanes like to stay over the warm water. So generally they come across Florida and come into the Gulf and have to come into, the United States because there's nowhere to go. They get trapped in the Gulf, or they kind of rake up the eastern seaboard. So they tend to hit more often like north of Myrtle Beach. So North Carolina, Wilmington area gets, there's a part that jets out of North Carolina, and that sort of tricks up the hurricanes and sends them inland. It's pretty rare for Charleston to get a direct hit for a hurricane. Really the only major hurricane that has hit Charleston was Hurricane Hugo, which hit here in 1989. So prior to Hurricane Hugo hitting, Charleston obviously had historic buildings and history here, but it was primarily a port town. It was a military town. It was actually a pretty depressed military town. And then when Hurricane Hugo hit and they received FEMA money in South Carolina, they actually funneled that money into restoring so many historical landmarks in the Charleston Peninsula. Charleston actually has more historical landmarks per square mile than anywhere else in the United States. And they brought in restaurateurs, they brought in hoteliers. So they actually created this tourist economy in 1989. And that brought to it a lot of people from Ohio started coming down and doing vacations. And people from Michigan and people from sort of the Midwest started coming to South Carolina, well before anything happened with a great influx of people to South Carolina, but they started coming down here to vacation and then they wanted to retire here. So it's kind of like a best kept secret. kind of, obviously college football here is a really big deal. So there's probably more Buckeye fans here than there are of people in, rivaling South Carolina schools, but a huge, huge influx of people from Ohio. Prior to the last few years, there was sort of a natural influx. So, they really built this industry around restaurants and the history and really celebrating that. And it's built this huge city that keeps rolling out from it. I think I kind of went off a little bit of a tangent of it, but it is sort of that, Hurricane Hugo actually sort of made Charleston.
So let's go back into your favorite things to do, because people always like to know about entertainment, activities, sports, and maybe you can tie in a little bit about the weather, because everybody's going to want to know what about the weather. It's what?
The humidity here. How bad is the humidity and how bad are the bugs?
Let's talk about the fun stuff first, and then do a little bit about the weather.
Yes, I mean, Charleston obviously is one of the biggest draws. The nice thing about it is it has all the charm of a city that you've seen on television. I mean, Condé Nast has named it with the best tourist destination for, I think, over a decade. Every year it's gotten #1 from Condé Nast because, just walking around Charleston, you could spend days walking around Charleston, popping in and out of restaurants and cafes and really just soaking up the culture and the history of Charleston. And then next would obviously be the beaches. I mean, the Atlantic Ocean is so much warmer than the Pacific Ocean. It's like bathwater out there in the summer, and really fine, really fine sand in a lot of the beaches. So the beaches in Charleston are probably our two favorite things. Obviously, we're in the South, so sports are huge. My son is a nationally ranked tennis player, so we spend a lot of time doing that and spending time in a resort throughout South Carolina, because I didn't know it when you pick the sport, but it's really nice to be able to go play on Kiowa and go play on Hilton Head all the time. Hilton Head is one of our favorite destinations. When we lived in California, we tried to go to Hawaii as much as possible. I will tell you that Hilton Head gives me that same Hawaii vibe. It's not a private island, but it's an island that basically has bridges that take you over to it. That's connected to the main state of South Carolina, but they do call it an island, and it's full of resorts and beautiful beaches and bike paths, and it's great to have a vacation destination an hour and a half away from us. So we probably try to go down there once every 6 weeks or so, and just for a weekend getaway.
Cool. And then how about the weather? Do we have 4 different seasons? Does it ever snow? What's going on with the weather where you're at?
I will tell you that 90% of the time the weather is amazing. I mean, right now we're in the 50s to the low 80s. It'll stay like that until Thanksgiving. I will say that probably we'll have 3 and 4 day spans all in the winter and in the summer that happen probably 4 or 5 times where it doesn't get over 40 in the winter, and in the summer it gets over 90 with high humidity. But it's not like we have 3 months of high humidity and high temperatures. We'll have, sort of heat waves of 3 and 4 day spans where you're like, okay, it's hot and humid, and to where the coastal breeze can't really break through it, so it gets that little bit of stagnant humidity. But we're definitely not a city with huge concrete buildings, so it doesn't really retain the heat here. We always sort of had that coastal breeze coming through. I lived in Sacramento for a time in my life, and I will take a July in Charleston over the 115 dry heat in Sacramento any day.
And then,
it does take a little getting used to, but I really enjoy the humidity actually.
People always are complaining. One of the biggest complaints in California is traffic and congestion, getting in and out of the airport. What does the transportation look like in your community?
So that's probably the one place that we are actually, behind, just because the growth has been so quick that, the infrastructure is now trying to catch up. There's a couple major projects happening here. They're widening 26, and they're trying to take, so when you look at that map of Charleston, right, we were kind of talking about, so you have, the peninsula of Charleston, Mount Pleasant, the coast, and then you have North Charleston, which is where most of the jobs are right now. It's where your military bases are, it's where Boeing is, where Bosch is, where a lot of your jobs are in that central area. It's where the airport is, and then you have Somerville on the other side. So everyone is sort of commuting towards this central hub in North Charleston right now. But then what I was saying as well is that we have a great railroad coming through, as well as a port coming in, alongside the Charleston Peninsula. So on the outside of Somerville, you actually have Ridgeville up to St. George, where they're building all of the new industrial complexes. And the goal is to start taking some of those jobs and move the traffic out that direction as we're expanding. So that's a huge impetus and influence of what's happening with the infrastructure. They don't want to start, they don't want to do eminent domain here and start ripping out neighborhoods and putting in multi-freeways and those sorts of things. They really want to disperse the jobs and disperse the traffic to go in different directions. And just really not turn it into a city full of overpasses, which I appreciate, but we are definitely having some growing pains right now.
I have to say, this is probably one of the most thorough talks we've had about a community, and I appreciate. There's no question you are an expert on your area. So if you're looking for a realtor,
I take it personally. So
you gotta really call Corinne. Just to clarify, and I know I can see Terry has a question up there, but just to clarify, what would be? Is it no less than an hour from anywhere to get to the airport, or is it going to be a little bit longer than that?
Well, it's less than an hour. In all honesty, from Summer, like the biggest commute probably would be from Somerville to Mount Pleasant or Somerville to downtown Charleston. The nice thing about here is that we still have a rush hour.
Yeah.
So if you work at 9 o'clock, it'll probably take you an hour to get somewhere. If you work somewhere outside of that, like leaving your house before 7:30 or after 8:45, it'll take you 45, 50 minutes to get there. Yeah. My house with no traffic to the airport is 20, 25 minutes. And it's sort of 20, 25 minutes from everywhere. It's in the center of everything. But really when it's traffic, you're adding 10 to 15 minutes. You're not adding 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, Terry, didn't you tell me once that you went to the airport? It's about 5 miles away and it took you 3.5 hours in California?
Oh, that's in California, of course. Well, it took me 5 minutes or 3 hours to go to 7-Eleven down the street. Traffic's horrific in California. Hey, Corinne, I wanted to ask you, you brought up mountains. And so can you talk about, if you want to get away to the mountains, how far that is and what you get for that? And then I'd also like to know about freshwater lakes. I'm sure you've got some freshwater lakes in the area too.
Absolutely. So from my house to Greenville, and Greenville would essentially be like the foothills. It would kind of remind you of like El Dorado Hills or, somewhere that sort of butts up against the Sierra Nevadas. So my house to Greenville is a 3-hour drive. It's one freeway, a straight shot. And really to get up into the mountains, you want to get up into like Brevard or Asheville, which is actually in North Carolina. But that's where you would get into the Smoky Mountains. If you just go over the Smoky Mountains on the other side, you get to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and that's about a 4.5-hour drive. So you can get a taste of the foothills by going up to Greenville and just outside of there in 3 hours. To get into the mountains, you're talking 4 hours. To get to the Tennessee side, you're talking 4.5 hours.
Okay. And then what do you have as far as freshwater recreation? Do you guys have reservoirs or whatever?
Absolutely. So we have, so in our sort of Central Valley area, right, let's say like Columbia area up to the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, you have lakes all throughout that area. So, if you are doing freshwater lakes, you generally want to stay about an hour off the coast because obviously we have gators. So we do have Lake Marion, which is a very, very deep lake that's right outside of Charleston. It's about 20 minutes from my house, which you can have boating. There are gators in there, but it's deep water, so you just have to not swim in the shallows. Getting up to outside of like Lexington area, outside of Columbia, or up to like Lake Wiley in the Charlotte suburb area would probably be your, area of lakes where you have a minimal risk of gators. But then you go up to the Clemson and Anderson area, and there's Lake Keowee. There's beautiful lakes up there right on the border of South Carolina and Georgia between Greenville and Atlanta. Really, really beautiful lakes up there as well.
Great, thank you.
That's where Clemson University is. There's a little college town and then a lot of lake houses right around there.
So one of the things that we love to share is, and maybe you can tie in both of these, when we're talking about people that are on the fence and they really want to leave California, they're not sure where to go. Maybe could you give some ideas and some thoughts, and maybe you can share your own personal experiences of how you left. And if somebody could have told you and given you some advice back then, talk to the people that are on leaving California and give them some advice on how they can actually do it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we got to the point, it was probably 5 years that we were toying with the idea. I mean, as soon as we had kids, we just knew that we didn't want to raise them in California. My husband and I are both born and raised in California. It just wasn't the same state it was when we grew up. we wanted to do something different with them. I felt like in California, we were working so hard and working so much and never getting ahead, that when I started looking outside, I mean, I will tell you, we did it. It took a couple of years for us to sort of rebuild. We definitely had the plan for it, and definitely were much more conservative in our spending the first couple of years here. It did set us back on our long-term retirement plan, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I remember my husband and I would walk the kids to school, and just talking about, like, we had sort of been in a particular, just not quite finding our footing just yet, and just taking a little bit longer to really get up to speed. And we were both starting brand new businesses when we moved here. So, and just looking at our kids, we just looked at each other and we're like, it's all worth it. If we have to work 3 or 5 extra years, the quality of life we have right now is worth it. The thing I love about South Carolina, that, I mean, so many families, I'll tell you one huge difference. I worked at the front desk at my husband's chiropractic clinic, and I feel like sometimes in California, it was, you know, we did well in California, and I felt like people in California were struggling so much that they were always sort of looking for a deal or somehow to have us, you know, what are your packages? What are you doing? Like, what can you come out and do this event for free for us? Because everyone's sort of in that struggle, right? And we were in that struggle as well, even though we were doing well. And then when we came out here to South Carolina, my husband was just starting to see patients, and, you know, he brought families in. It's just like, come in, try me out, see if we're a good fit. I'll give you a free treatment. And they would walk out and pay him because they're like, you have a wife and 2 kids. Like, I'm going to pay you. Like, people here really appreciate good quality, hard work. They really appreciate that, you know, they want you to be able to afford to spend time with your family. Like, nobody is really looking to, people just have more disposable income. I don't know, they have an ability to really compensate you and pay you for your work and pay you for your value. And that was just a really refreshing change. I feel like here people work hard, but because they work hard because they want to play hard. Whereas I feel like in California, we had to work to live. So I'm not going to sit here and say that we moved out here and just all of a sudden everything went perfectly and you know, everything went great. I will tell you, we made friends really quickly. My kids made friends really quickly. You know, there's so many people moving here that everyone's been the new kid or their best friend's the new kid. You know, my son going into 2nd grade and my daughter was going into kindergarten. But I have so many clients that have moved here that have kids going into high school and kids going into middle school that are kicking and screaming, not wanting to leave their friends. It's so welcoming here. I know it's a cliche, but and so many families are moving here that they're really used to kids being new here, and they really do embrace them. And there's so many activities for them to get to know each other, between youth groups, through churches or sports or just even school. So, I mean, it was tough. It was tough to leave everything and restart, but I don't regret it for 1 second. The quality of life of my kids even now, and we lived in Lake Tahoe. You know, we went back and visited a couple of years, and my kids always tell me how grateful they are that we live here.
So, favorite story that you have, and then Terry probably wants to wrap up. I want to be respectful of time. Time always goes by so fast. I feel like I was in Charleston today, so that's really cool.
Oh, God, I'm glad.
Maybe if you have a favorite story of somebody that actually left California and is now living in your community, and then we'll turn it over to Terry, and then we'll probably need to wrap up. So go ahead.
There's so many. I mean, there's one that actually, I will tell you that so many people have moved to my exact neighborhood that I started thinking that I was, you know, convincing them that my neighborhood was the best. But I have to realize that I chose my neighborhood, so I can see why other people would like it. There's just so many families that were within the neighborhood that I will look around the pool in the summer and be like, wow, you know, it just feels really good that I helped that many families come here. I have one client that actually came to me through the Leaving California group who lives in my neighborhood, and now she just started her own cottage business as Mama Lupia's food. So she's actually making egg rolls and bringing Asian food here, because sometimes the 2 things that we don't really have here are Asian food and Mexican food. And we don't have In-N-Out. They're coming though. We definitely have a couple of really great taquerias popping up here, but those cuisines are coming here. But she actually has introduced our entire neighborhood to Mama Lupia's.
You know what, Corinne, I'm glad you brought that up, because we have gotten some resistance from communities across the United States where they say, we don't want Californians coming to our city because they're going to come here, they're going to vote differently. They're going to try to change everything. Is that what happens? Because we don't believe that that's what's actually happening.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's definitely that. I feel like that was a more prevailing feeling, like when we first moved here, because people weren't fleeing states because of political affiliation. I don't feel like that's who's coming into the states now. I feel like so many people left California and left New York over the last few years for sort of political asylum. I felt like if I came to Charleston that people would give me pushback being from California, but as it is, you know, the first thing when I say I'm from California is they'll talk about, well, it's a beautiful state, why would you leave? And I'm like, I just didn't want to raise my family there. And they're like, welcome, good for you. Like, I think that it's so apparent that, you know, that there's clear reasons to what's happening in those states can be so egregious for certain people who don't align with what's happening in those states, that there's a huge contingency to come here in South Carolina and keep South Carolina conservative. And so they're welcoming all warriors.
Terry, some closing thoughts?
Well, first, Corinne, thank you so much. I know you've helped a lot of people move from California. And as you said, some people in this group also, we're so grateful for that. And it's grateful to have, it's great to have someone who lived in California, born and raised, that has experienced the entire life cycle, if you will, of actually deciding to leave California, figuring out where to go and everything else. While I'm thinking of it, can you go ahead and give us your contact information and so people can reach out to you, because I'm sure they will.
Yeah, so my name is Corinne Kane, so Corinne, last name Kane. So my email is CorinneKaneRealtor@gmail.com. One of the best tips I did is I kept my California phone number. So 530-318-5656, because it helps me screen telemarketing calls. Because if you have a 530 area code and you're calling me right now and you're not in my contacts, I know that you're a scammer. So, and nobody gives me a hard time. It actually sort of helps that people know that I, you know, am sort of on the same page and relocated with them. Nobody gives me a hard time for having a California phone number. So don't feel like you have to change it right when you get here.
Yeah, I still have my 925 number from the Bay Area for the exact same reason.
Yeah.
I get calls from all over the Bay Area, and 925. I'm like, I know who you are and I know why you're calling me. I'm not taking your call. So yes, I agree with you.
If you have a 530, I may not answer the first time, but leave me a voicemail. I'll call you right back.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I just love the Charleston area. I got to tell you, I can see why people would want to move there. The quality is really, it comes down to quality of life, right? Your gas is inexpensive. You've got a great economy there.
$297 for gas. My property taxes, I just got my property tax bill at $2,400 a year. I will tell you that like insurance and things like that are the same across the board. Utility bills tend to be the same, but I mean, just on the property taxes, I save a bundle. You know, in California, that's almost my whole mortgage payment, what I used to pay in taxes in California. I mean, I could go on about the education. I mean, the school system obviously is something that is in huge scrutiny. I will tell you that South Carolina has a huge rural population. And so when you're looking at, you know, people look at crime rates and school rates, and I mean, every city has good, every city has bad, every city has everything in between. I mean, my kids are receiving a phenomenal education. My 8th grader is, you know, they have a GATE program, the Gifted and Talented Education program here, to where his entire classes are all honors classes from 2nd grade on if they test into it. I mean, he's taking geometry in 8th grade and just got invited to take the PSAT as an 8th grader. So, you know, that's a South Carolina educated boy who's doing great. So
that's great. That's great. Well, thanks,
Corinne.
Thank you so much. You've given so much great advice. And if you're looking for a realtor, and we don't care where you're going, I mean, you're looking for a realtor like Corinne, you're looking for someone that's going to help you with the community you're going to live in, not the house you're going to buy. And I think that's the biggest takeaway that I got from this session. I can't wait to go to Charleston and see it. I would love to go there. And
I'll show you around.
Oh, yeah, I would love to. And we will be showing this. We'll rebroadcast this later on. And I appreciate everybody tuning in. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.